The office buzzed with the usual Monday morning energy, a mix of hurried footsteps, the clatter of keyboards, and the murmur of voices discussing projects. Sarah, a senior marketing manager, sat at her desk meticulously organizing her notes for an upcoming presentation. Her face was calm, but her body bore the subtle signs of her pregnancy. Slightly swollen ankles, a small but noticeable baby bump, and an ever-present glow that only her closest co-workers seemed to notice. Despite her condition, Sarah's dedication to her work was unwavering. She had been with the company for 5 years, consistently delivering top-notch results. Sarah had always been a model employee, the type who never missed a deadline and regularly went above and beyond for her team. But today felt different. There was an uneasy tension in the air. Her boss, CEO Robert Whitman, had called her into his office for a discussion. The email had been brief and cold, giving her no indication of what it was about. As Sarah approached the CEO's office, her nerves began to bubble. Whitman was known for his no-nonsense attitude and relentless focus on profitability. Employees often whispered about his ruthlessness, recounting stories of how he had fired people on the spot for minor infractions. Sarah had never been on his bad side, but she had seen others crumble under his scrutiny. "Come in," Whitman's deep voice boomed when she knocked lightly on the door. She entered cautiously, her hands clutching a folder of her recent accomplishments, just in case she needed to defend her performance. Whitman sat behind his large mahogany desk, his sharp suit and steely demeanor exuding authority. His piercing eyes scanned her as she sat down, making her feel small despite her confidence in her work. "Sarah," he began, his tone devoid of warmth, "let's cut to the chase. I've reviewed the team's recent performance metrics, and while your contributions are notable, there's an issue we need to address." Sarah blinked, unsure of what he was referring to. "An issue, sir? I'd be happy to clarify anything or improve in any areas you feel are lacking." Whitman leaned back in his chair, clasping his hands together. "It's not about your work, Peresi. It's about your condition." "My condition?" she repeated, confusion spreading across her face. "Yes, your pregnancy," he said bluntly. "You've done well so far, but let's be realistic. A pregnant woman can't perform at the same level as someone who isn't distracted by personal matters. You'll need maternity leave soon, and when you return, you'll be juggling a child and a career. It's not ideal for someone in your position." Sarah's heart sank. She had prepared herself for criticism, but not for this. "With all due respect, sir, my pregnancy hasn't affected my performance. I've managed my responsibilities effectively, and I plan to continue doing so. I've even adjusted my schedule to ensure I can balance everything." Whitman waved her words away dismissively. "That's irrelevant. The company needs people who are fully committed, not distracted. I'm afraid we have to let you go." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. "You're firing me? Because I'm pregnant?" Whitman's expression remained cold. "This isn't personal, Sarah. It's about what's best for the company. I've already spoken to HR. You'll receive a severance package and assistance finding a new job if needed." Sarah felt a lump rise in her throat, but she forced herself to stay composed. "Sir, this is unfair and discriminatory. I've given this company everything. Late nights, weekends, my best ideas, and this is how I'm treated." Whitman shrugged, his indifference cutting deeper than his words. "Life isn't fair, Sarah, but business is business. I'm sure you'll land on your feet." Unable to hold back her emotions any longer, Sarah stood up, her hands trembling. "This isn't just about me. It's about every woman who has been punished for choosing to have a family. You may think you've won today, but this isn't over." She walked out of the office, her head held high despite the tears threatening to spill. Her co-workers glanced at her curiously, sensing the tension but unsure of what had happened. Sarah returned to her desk, gathered her belongings, and left the building without looking back. That evening, Sarah sat on the couch at home, her husband, Michael, by her side. She recounted the day's events, her voice breaking as she described Whitman's heartless dismissal. Michael listened quietly, his jaw tightening with every word. "That man has no idea who he's dealing with," Michael said, his voice calm but laced with anger. Sarah shook her head. "There's nothing we can do. He's the CEO. He has all the power." Michael placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Maybe he does, but that doesn't mean he's untouchable. Trust me, Sarah. We'll figure this out." She looked at him, her tears finally spilling over. "I just wanted to do my job. I didn't deserve this." Michael pulled her into a hug, his mind already racing with plans. He wasn't just angry, he was determined. Whitman's actions had crossed a line, and Michael wasn't the type to let such injustices slide. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Michael's connections within the corporate world were far-reaching, and his influence could rival even the most powerful CEOs. As Sarah drifted off to sleep that night, exhausted from the emotional toll of the day, Michael sat in his study, making phone calls and setting a plan into motion. The battle had only just begun. The days following Sarah's abrupt dismissal were a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, despair, and frustration seemed to take turns ruling her thoughts. The severance package she received was barely enough to cover a few months of expenses, and the sting of Whitman's callous words lingered. Sarah felt a profound sense of betrayal, not just by the company she had worked so hard for, but by a system that seemed rigged against women like her. Michael, however, refused to let her wallow in defeat. "You need to fight back," he urged one evening, his voice filled with determination. "What Whitman did isn't just wrong. It's illegal. We should consult a lawyer." Sarah hesitated. "What good will that do? He's the CEO of a multimillion-dollar company. Even if I have a case, they have the resources to bury me in court." Michael's expression hardened. "That doesn't mean we shouldn't try. This isn't just about you. It's about setting a precedent so he doesn't do this to anyone else." Though Sarah was reluctant, Michael's support gave her the courage to explore her options. She reached out to a friend who worked as a labor attorney, and after a lengthy consultation, they determined she had a strong case for wrongful termination and pregnancy discrimination. Meanwhile, back at the office, Whitman was riding high on what he considered a tough but necessary decision. He viewed Sarah's departure as a move that streamlined the company's workforce, freeing up resources for more committed employees. But not everyone in the company shared his enthusiasm. News of Sarah's firing had spread quickly, and many employees were outraged. Sarah was well-liked and respected, and her dismissal sent a chilling message to others who might face personal challenges. Conversations in the break room and whispers in hallways carried a common theme. If they can do this to Sarah, they can do it to any of us. Among those most affected was Linda, Sarah's former assistant. Linda had witnessed firsthand how tirelessly Sarah worked and how passionately she cared about her team. She felt a gnawing sense of guilt for not standing up for Sarah when she needed support. One afternoon, Linda overheard a heated conversation between two other employees. "Did you hear what Whitman said about her?" one of them whispered. "He practically admitted he fired her because she's pregnant." "Yeah, but what can we do? He's the CEO," the other replied, frustration evident in their tone. Linda felt her resolve harden. She couldn't undo what had happened, but maybe she could help expose the injustice. She began discreetly gathering evidence, emails, meeting notes, and anything else that could support Sarah's case. As Sarah and Michael prepared for the legal battle ahead, Michael was working on another plan entirely, one he hadn't yet shared with his wife. Unbeknownst to Sarah, Michael wasn't just a supportive husband. He was a prominent figure in the corporate world, with deep ties to influential business leaders. His modest demeanor often masked the fact that he owned several companies, including one that had recently acquired a majority stake in Whitman's firm. Michael had initially kept this information from Sarah, not wanting to overshadow her career achievements or make her feel as though she needed his influence to succeed. But now, he realized that staying silent wasn't an option. Whitman's actions had crossed a line, and Michael had the power to do something about it. Over the next few weeks, Michael quietly began attending board meetings at Whitman's company under the guise of an investor representative. Whitman, of course, had no idea who he was. He simply viewed Michael as another suit in a room full of them. Michael listened carefully during these meetings, taking note of Whitman's management style and the culture he had cultivated. What he saw confirmed his worst fears. Whitman's leadership was driven by greed, ego, and a complete disregard for the well-being of his employees. But Michael wasn't just gathering information, he was building alliances. He began reaching out to other board members, subtly planting seeds of doubt about Whitman's ability to lead the company effectively. Back at home, Sarah was beginning to feel a renewed sense of purpose. Her attorney had filed a formal complaint with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, EEOC, and the case was gaining traction. Media outlets had started picking up on the story, framing Sarah as a courageous whistleblower fighting against corporate injustice. The public outcry was immediate and intense. Social media was flooded with messages of support for Sarah, with many sharing their own experiences of workplace discrimination. Hashtag Justice for Sarah began trending, and the pressure on Whitman's company was mounting. Sarah was overwhelmed by the support but also nervous about the attention. "What if this backfires?" she confided in Michael one evening. "What if people think I'm just trying to make trouble?" Michael took her hands in his. "Sarah, you're not alone in this. You're standing up for what's right and people can see that. Besides," he added with a small smile, "you've got more allies than you realize." Sarah didn't know what he meant, but his words gave her strength. The turning point came during a high-profile board meeting. Whitman, confident in his position, dismissed the growing controversy as a minor PR issue. He assured the board that it would blow over, insisting that firing Sarah had been the right decision. But as the meeting progressed, Whitman began to notice a shift in the room. Board members who usually supported him were unusually quiet, and others seemed outright skeptical. Michael, who had remained silent for most of the meeting, finally spoke up. "Mr. Whitman," he began, his tone measured but firm, "what do you have to say about the accusations of discrimination against you?" Whitman bristled. "I've already addressed this. The termination was based on performance and what's best for the company. This has been blown out of proportion." Michael leaned forward, his gaze steady. "And you don't think firing a pregnant employee sends a harmful message? What kind of culture are you fostering here?" Whitman's face reddened. "With all due respect, Mr. Johnson, you don't know the full story." Michael's lips curled into a faint smile. "Oh, I think I do." The room fell silent as Michael stood, his presence commanding attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, as the representative of the largest stakeholder in this company, I believe it's time we reevaluate Mr. Whitman's leadership." Whitman's jaw dropped. "You're the largest stakeholder?" Michael nodded. "And as of now, I'm recommending we begin discussions to replace the CEO." The room erupted in murmurs as Whitman sat in stunned silence. The man he had dismissed as just another investor had just turned his world upside down. And Michael wasn't finished. "But before we proceed, I suggest we find a way to make amends to Ms. Sarah Johnson. Because let me assure you, this isn't over." The aftermath of that meeting would change everything. Sarah had been working tirelessly on her legal case with her attorney, gathering as much evidence as possible to prove the wrongful termination. However, despite her best efforts, the process was emotionally exhausting. She often questioned whether the battle was worth it. But every time doubt crept in, Michael was there, steadfast in his support, encouraging her to stay strong. Meanwhile, the pressure was building on Whitman. The news of Sarah's firing had spread far and wide, and the company's reputation was taking a hit. Customers were beginning to voice their dissatisfaction on social media, and several of the company's business partners were reconsidering their affiliations. Whitman had always believed that no one could challenge his authority, but he was starting to realize that he might have underestimated the backlash. The board of directors, too, was growing uneasy. They had received anonymous complaints from employees about the toxic work environment Whitman had fostered. His arrogance, they realized, was not only tarnishing the company's name, but also jeopardizing its future. Behind the scenes, Michael continued to build alliances among the board members. Though he hadn't revealed his full connection to Sarah, he made it clear that he believed Whitman's leadership was a liability. His calm demeanor and insightful observations made an impression on many, and slowly but surely, the tide began to turn. The tension reached its peak during a high-stakes investor meeting, where Whitman was expected to provide an update on the company's strategy. The meeting was held in the company's sleek boardroom, its walls lined with accolades and awards that reflected past successes. But today, the atmosphere was far from celebratory. Whitman strode into the room with his usual air of confidence, but there was a slight unease in his step. He knew that the backlash from Sarah's case was going to come up, but he was confident he could spin the narrative in his favor. Michael was already seated at the table, dressed in a sharp suit and exuding an air of quiet authority. Whitman barely glanced at him, still unaware of who Michael truly was. As the meeting began, Whitman launched into a rehearsed speech about the company's resilience and future prospects. He glossed over the controversy surrounding Sarah's firing, dismissing it as a misunderstanding blown out of proportion by the media. But just as he was about to move on to the next topic, Michael raised his hand. "Mr. Whitman," Michael began, his voice calm but firm, "I have a few questions about your recent management decisions, particularly the termination of a senior employee, Sarah Johnson. Could you elaborate on why you believe this was in the best interest of the company?" Whitman stiffened. He hadn't expected anyone to challenge him so directly. "As I've stated before, the decision was based on performance metrics and aligning the team with our long-term goals," he replied, his tone defensive. Michael tilted his head slightly. "Interesting, because from what I've gathered, Ms. Johnson was one of the most dedicated and high-performing employees on your team. It seems her termination had less to do with performance and more to do with her personal circumstances." The room grew tense as the other board members exchanged glances. Whitman's face reddened. "With all due respect, Mr. Johnson, I don't believe you're privy to the full details of the situation." Michael's lips curled into a faint smile. "Perhaps not. But I am privy to the fact that your decision has resulted in a PR nightmare for this company and has alienated many of its most loyal employees." Whitman opened his mouth to respond, but Michael held up a hand to stop him. "Before you continue, let me formally introduce myself. My name is Michael Johnson, and I'm not just an investor in this company. I'm the majority stakeholder." Whitman froze, his eyes widening in shock. The room fell silent as the weight of Michael's words sank in. "And if you're still wondering," Michael continued, his gaze unwavering, "Sarah Johnson is my wife." The revelation hit Whitman like a freight train. He looked around the room, hoping for support from the other board members, but they avoided his gaze. Michael stood, his presence commanding. "Let me make one thing clear," he said, his voice steady but firm. "I've been watching how you run this company, and I'm deeply disappointed. Your actions have not only hurt my wife but have also jeopardized the integrity of this organization. Your leadership, or lack thereof, has brought us to this point." Whitman stammered, trying to find the words to defend himself. I wasn't aware of your connection to Sarah. If I had known," Michael cut him off. "That's precisely the problem, Mr. Whitman. You didn't take the time to truly understand the people who work for you. You dismissed Sarah without a second thought, assuming she was expendable. But she's not, and neither are the other employees you've mistreated." The boardroom was silent, save for the quiet murmur of Michael's voice as he addressed the other members. "I propose we vote on Mr. Whitman's continued role as CEO. It's clear to me that this company needs a leader who values its employees and its reputation." One by one, the board members nodded in agreement. Whitman's expression shifted from disbelief to desperation as he realized his position was slipping away. Later that evening, Sarah received a call from Michael. He explained everything that had transpired at the meeting, his voice filled with both relief and triumph. "You're amazing," Sarah said, her voice breaking with emotion. "I can't believe you did that for me." "I'd do it 100 times over," Michael replied. "But this wasn't just about you. It was about standing up to a system that treats people as disposable." For the first time in weeks, Sarah felt a glimmer of hope. With Michael by her side, she knew they could overcome anything. The day after the board meeting, Whitman's termination as CEO was announced publicly. The news spread quickly, sending shockwaves throughout the corporate world. Employees who had endured years of mistreatment under his reign were elated. For many, it felt like justice had finally been served. Sarah, however, was still processing the whirlwind of events. She sat in her living room with Michael, their young daughter playing quietly on the floor. The relief was palpable, but so was the uncertainty of what came next. Michael didn't waste time stepping into his new role as interim CEO. Despite his calm demeanor during the board meeting, he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The company's reputation was tarnished, employee morale was low, and the fallout from Whitman's mismanagement was far-reaching. His first priority was addressing the staff. He called for an all-hands meeting, inviting every employee, from top executives to entry-level workers, to gather in the company's spacious auditorium. When Michael stepped onto the stage, there was a buzz of anticipation. Many employees knew him only as a faceless investor. Seeing him in person, especially after the dramatic events involving Sarah, sparked a mix of curiosity and hope. Michael began with a simple acknowledgement. "Good morning, everyone. My name is Michael Johnson, and as of today, I am stepping in as the interim CEO of this company. I know the past few months, and years for that matter, have been difficult, but I'm here to tell you that change is coming." He paused, letting his words sink in. This company is built on the hard work and dedication of its employees, and it's time we start valuing that. Starting today, we're implementing new policies to ensure that every voice is heard, every contribution is recognized, and every employee is treated with respect. The room erupted in applause. For the first time in years, many employees felt seen and valued. Meanwhile, Michael had a special plan in mind for Sarah. He knew that reinstating her position would be a powerful statement, not just for her, but for everyone who had faced similar injustices. One afternoon, as Sarah was preparing to pick up their daughter from daycare, Michael approached her with a mischievous smile. "I have a surprise for you," he said, holding out a sealed envelope. Sarah raised an eyebrow, curious but cautious. "What is it?" "Open it and see," Michael replied, his eyes twinkling. Inside the envelope was an official letter from the company. It read, "Dear Sarah Johnson, we are pleased to formally reinstate you to your position as Senior Project Manager, effective immediately. Furthermore, we would like to offer our sincerest apologies for the unfair treatment you experienced. Your dedication and contributions have always been invaluable to this organization." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she read the letter. She looked up at Michael, her voice trembling. "You didn't have to do this." Michael placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "Yes, I did. You've earned this, Sarah. And it's not just about you, it's about setting a precedent for everyone else. No one should ever be treated the way you were." As weeks turned into months, the company underwent a complete transformation. Michael's leadership brought a renewed sense of purpose and integrity. He implemented initiatives to improve work-life balance, provide better benefits, and create opportunities for professional growth. Sarah, too, became an integral part of the company's revival. She used her position to mentor younger employees, especially women and those from underrepresented backgrounds, encouraging them to pursue their goals fearlessly. Her story became a symbol of resilience and justice, inspiring employees across all levels. One evening, as Sarah and Michael sat on their back porch watching the sunset, Sarah reflected on how far they had come. "You know," she said, sipping her tea, "there were times I thought I'd never recover from what happened. But now, looking back, I realize it was a turning point. Not just for me, but for so many others." Michael nodded, a smile playing on his lips. "It's amazing what happens when people stand together and refuse to accept injustice. You showed incredible strength, Sarah. You inspired me and everyone else around you." Their daughter ran out to join them, her laughter filling the air. It was a moment of pure joy, a reminder of why they had fought so hard. The story of Sarah and Michael didn't just resonate within the company. It caught the attention of the broader community. News outlets covered their journey, and social media was abuzz with support and admiration. Their experience became a powerful reminder that standing up for what's right could lead to profound change. As they reflected on their journey, Michael turned to Sarah and said, "We should share our story with even more people. Maybe it'll inspire others to stand up for themselves, too. And so they did through interviews, community events, and online platforms. If you've been inspired by Sarah and Michael's journey, remember that change begins with courage. Whether it's speaking out against injustice, supporting someone in need, or simply standing up for what's right, every action makes a difference. Let's keep the conversation going and create a world where everyone is valued and respected. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel for more stories that inspire and empower. Together, we can make a difference. Thank you for watching.